What's up, everybody? Welcome to the How to Lead podcast, conversation designed to help you develop yourself and those around you. My name's Adam, joined by Clay. Clay, one of the things I appreciate about you, lots of things, but one of them that really stands out is you're a phenomenal question asker. You are, I've told you this before on the podcast, you are one of the more curious people I know. Which makes it great to lead, lead conversations, to have lunch or dinner with you, because you just ask such good questions. So I admire that about you, but you've got a story where somebody pushed back a little bit against that. Is that right?
Yeah, well, this episode we're going to talk about, we're going to, before we flip the coin and look at the other side, we are going to talk about, sometimes it can be a little off-putting to be a question asker, right?
Yeah.
When I was first married, we had been married, I would say probably less than a year, and we're hanging out with my in-laws, and one of my brother-in-laws, which I don't know, that's a brother-in-law can be kind of intimidating because, he was in the family, and then here I come in the family, and who is this guy, and who does he think he is? And at one point, he said something after a couple hours of us hanging out one evening. He said, I asked him something about their life or work or something, which I thought, it didn't seem invasive, it didn't seem off-putting, but he said, I see what you're doing. I was like, what do you mean, see what you're doing? Like, I don't know that I have a strategy behind this. And he was like, this is what pastors do. Pastors use questions to control the conversation so they don't have to be honest, or so that they can remain hidden about their own life. And I was like, I have never once thought about that as a strategy, and now I'm going to be insecure in every conversation that we're ever going to have for the rest of our relationship, which has been true for the last 15 years. So
now you feel like you got to start every conversation with like Jenny and I, man, we just got this huge fight. Can I tell you all about it? Yeah.
Exactly. So I just whenever I'm around him, I just launch into personal stories about myself, oversharing, TMI, just telling him everything about whatever's going on with me.
There is something I've never thought about that. There have been like some awkward social interactions where you're somewhere and you're around somebody and you don't really want to talk to them, so you just want to ask questions is maybe a way to say it. And then, but they'll wrestle the questions back, and then they become the question asker, and you're like, this is not what I want, right? I don't want to sit here and divulge a bunch of things. So that feels a little similar to what you're talking about there. But
well, Adam, quickly, one other little anecdote. We were at the beach a couple weeks ago. School gets out. The next day we leave and go down to the Gulf for a couple of days. Wonderful vacation. And we're at the pool, and a bunch of college students show up, and I heard them talking about Auburn, and so my sister went to Auburn. I said, oh, you guys go to Auburn? And they said, yeah, they're Camp War Eagle counselors. So like they put on the, like A&M has the fish camp. It's like the indoctrinating. It's where they teach you how to be in the cult, basically, right? Yeah. And the guy was so that kind of tells you the kind of person it was, real ambassador for the school, very eager, very gregarious. And he said, he started chatting. He said, can I ask you a question that I know it might seem like an interview question? I said, I guess, sure. And he said, what would you tell the 20-year-old version of yourself? I was on vacation. I was like, I don't want to answer this question. I'm not in work mode. I'm not in an interview. I don't want to have to think through it. And so I just straight up told him, I said, I'm not going to answer that question. What I wanted to say is I would tell the 20-year-old version of myself not to ask this kind of question to someone. That's what I would tell him. But I didn't say that. But yeah, sometimes questions can be a little more than you bargained for, right?
Yeah.
And so in this episode, what we want to do is say, hey, it is important as you manage people, as you work with others, it is important to be a skilled question asker, but do it in a way that doesn't feel transactional, that doesn't feel like you're an interrogator, that doesn't feel like you're faking it, that doesn't feel like you're cornering someone instead of connecting with someone. And we want to teach you just a couple of thoughts, or we want to give you a couple thoughts on how to do that well.
This is the shadow side of a very big buzzword that's out there right now, which is curiosity. Right? Yeah. So we're all implored to be curious, be curious, be curious. Anybody that's listened to our episodes that we did that were very popular this year, which on coaching, that was one of the key things that we talked about is don't assume you know anything.
Right.
Ask.
Right.
I teach this coaching stuff all the time. And what I've been noticing over the last year is that there's always a question that pops up from a younger millennial or a Gen Z that's like, hey, this feels a little awkward. This feels a little fake. And this isn't just because like they're uncomfortable socially. This is just, I think there is a genuine concern that asking questions can come across sounding like an interrogator, like you're leading the witness, like you know the answer. Maybe even what it feels like, I think, is you come across sounding paternal, like you are the parent that catches the kid doing something wrong. And so I think it's good for us to rethink or maybe clarify this curiosity a little bit.
Yeah.
If somebody feels that tension, I want to try to relieve a little bit of that, because I think there's a few keys here that'll really help us, because curiosity is huge. It is such an important part of leadership.
Let me
We
try
can't
to.
just throw questions out. Yeah.
Here's a way maybe I would frame what you're saying. It sounds to me like they're not rejecting questions. Potentially, they're rejecting a style of questioning that needs to that potentially feels forced or one-sided. The real issue is really about the tone or the intent.
Yes.
And so let's.
Those are the words I always come
this.
back to. Yeah. So we just want to give you 4 things to think about here with this that'll hopefully help us come across with the right tone and the right intent. And so, number 1, asking fewer questions, asking better questions. I think that's one. So not peppering people.
Yeah.
Again, if you think of your favorite cop show where they have the detective, they've got him in the interrogation room, and it's like, question.
Where were you that night? What were you driving? What were you wearing?
That's right. Yes. Right. So let's not do that. I remember my buddy Adam Landrum saying, as a coach, he just said, listen, start to watch how many times you ask people 2 or 3 questions at one time. A good coach only asked 1 question at a time. And in that conversation, he would always correct me when I would be like, so, I mean, is that something that you wanted to have happen, or like, were you surprised by that? And he goes, well, that was 2 questions.
Right.
Which one would you like to know? One of them.
Would
Right.
you like
I'm going to
know
answer
if I was
one of them.
surprised
And
or-
so,
right.
yeah. So sometimes just the not that, and here's the real key. The better question is open-ended. You want to invite a story. And again,
Yeah.
Clay, I think this is what you do
Give
so
us an
well.
example.
Yeah. So what's been on your mind lately? Or how did you feel like that went?
Yeah. As opposed to, what are your top 3 goals in this season of life? Right.
That's right.
Yeah. That's
What would
a little
what would you
intimidating
tell
also.
your 20-year-old self?
Right.
That kind of stuff. So the more open-ended, it can be something that invites a story, something that invites just them talking. But again, you've got to get to that tone of like, I really want to know what you think here. Those are some ways to ask fewer, better questions, and then just let them talk.
I love that. Ask fewer, but ask better questions.
That's right.
Can I give number 2?
Yeah, go for it.
Number 2, match your questions to the moment. Right. I think this is what I was bothered by at the pool.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. I am at the pool on vacation. This is not an interview, right? So let me stop hammering on the eager and gregarious Auburn student, which, by the way, if you're listening, I admire your curiosity, but I do think it's important to match the questions to the moment, right? So figure out where you are in the relationship, figure out where you are in the season, where you are. I used to, when I was involved with managing a lot of people, I remember there would be our work week was Sunday to Thursday. So Thursday afternoon, I remember there was one particular employee who used to ask me the heaviest questions on Thursday afternoon. And I remember thinking, hey, we're rolling into the weekend. Like, why don't you put a pin in that and let's save that for when we get back to work on Sunday or Monday, right? But this is not the time for that question. So I think just being aware, you don't want to walk around being a curious robot. You want to walk around being a human. And what that means is you have EQ, that you're able to see, all right, where are we in the relationship? Where are we in the week? Where are we in the season? What is the mood? What's happening right now?
Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Yeah, when you're at lunch with your team, that's not, you can still ask open-ended questions that aren't, super deep. So you got to be able to read that moment and do that well. So match the questions of the moment. I like that. Number 3, this is the one that I try to use most often. I think this is really easy. This gets to intent, and that is just simply show your cards. Like, just declare your intent. That's what we said over and over again in those coaching episodes. Preface the tough questions with context, which in your example that you talked about, they did this a little bit. Hey, this may be an
I
interview
know this
question.
sounds like an interview question,
Yeah,
right?
but you can just say this may be a little bit personal, but I'm asking because I really want to understand.
That's what I needed, Adam. I needed that second part. I needed
Yes.
the, hey, I have found this. I've gotten some really good advice in the past from people when I asked this question, and I'd just love to see if you have any.
That's right.
Right?
This gets it into, let's just assume nobody knows why you're asking the question. Just assume that everybody's had a bad experience with open-ended questions where they felt like they were in trouble. They had to give the perfect answer because they didn't want to incriminate themselves. The more you can just go, I'm asking for me. I'm asking because I'm really curious. I'm asking not because I think you did anything wrong. This gets us into what David Yeager down at UT Austin talks about in his book 10 to 25, what he calls an authentic question, which is a question where you literally don't know the answer and you want to know the answer.
Great.
Again, I think that's part of your secret, Clay, when you ask these questions. I never feel like you're trying to catch me doing something wrong. It's like, oh, I have an opportunity to share something that he's really curious about. I get to, in a weird way, like teach almost. Like he's an inquisitive student right now, and so I get to share information with him because he seems to really want it. Show your cards on that. That vulnerability of letting them know why you're asking the question and that it's more for you, that can really earn trust.
Yeah, looking back, if I, in my early relationship with that brother-in-law that I mentioned that said, are you doing this to control the conversation or so that you can remain hidden and you just have to ask other people about themselves, but you never share anything about your own? I would have loved to, I probably should have responded. It would have been hard in that moment to be prepared for it. I wish I would have had this podcast episode then, right?
Yeah.
But I probably could have shown my cards better to say, hey, I'm not asking for any other reason other than we're probably only going to see you once a year or so. And I'm just curious to know. I'd love to know when people ask me what you do. I'd love to be able to answer them.
Yeah.
Or I'm just curious about what it is you're figuring out. I love telling, I tell this to high school students a lot when I used to do a lot of speaking for them, I would say, or in front of them, I would say, hey, a lot of adults are going to ask you what you want to do with your life. But don't feel intimidated by that, even though that might sound intimidating. Let me tell you why they're asking you that. They're asking you that because they're looking for other ideas themselves, because no one's happy in there aren't many people that are happy in their career, right? And that was just a way for me to say, hey, here's what their cards are, and just a way to create a little more openness, a little more grace in the relationship. But I love your line there that vulnerability earns trust. I think the more you're able to be vulnerable about your own, here's why I'm asking, I think the more vulnerable the other person is going to feel free to be when they're answering the question.
Yeah. All right, this last one, let me just share this, and I want to share a quick example of what I've learned about asking questions with having teenagers at home. So this fourth one is just listen like it matters. So the best questions in the world don't communicate that I'm not really listening, right? So you actually, if you're going to ask the question, you need to listen. And it's not like that curiosity, it's not just spoken, it really is felt. There's a vibe. You're using words to ask the question. They're reading tone and body language on whether or not they're going to trust it, okay? So you could be saying all the right words, but if your tone and body language communicates something different, that's it. What I've noticed with my teenage son, and I think this applies at work, is my son is reluctant to answer questions sometimes because I will use questions as a way to engage in debate. Is like, oh, so how are you thinking about that? Okay, all right. Well, have you ever thought about it this way? And it's like every answer I push back with your answer's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think that's some real introspection that we need to take on as leaders. Like, there's a difference between a debate and a conversation. And if you are finding that people are reluctant to answer your questions, I wonder if it's because every answer they give, you rebut back with, that's wrong. You're thinking about it wrong. You did it wrong. And so if you are constantly just pushing back and turning curiosity into a veiled form of proving why you're right, those questions are never going to be answered the way you want them to be answered.
Let me summarize these four things, which Adam, you were the driver behind this topic. I love this topic. I told you when you sent it to me, I said, this is going to be really good for me. This is one of those that's going to be helpful for me because I do consider myself an avid question asker, but these four big insights are so helpful in how we ask questions. Ask fewer but better questions. Match your questions to the moment. Show your cards. Be vulnerable. Be authentic in why you're asking. And then listen like it matters. Listen like you actually care about what the person is responding with or how they're answering the question.
Yeah. And so here's the two questions to reflect on this week is, am I asking this question to connect with this person or to control this person? And am I willing, this one is the real challenge, am I willing to hear something I didn't expect? And if you can say yes, like I'm asking to connect and I'm willing to hear something that I didn't expect, then I think you're in a really good spot. So just pick one relationship this week, pick one conversation, and just try to ask better questions. Don't rebut back, don't disagree, invite conversation, do a bunch of declaring intent, and see if you can't. I bet you'll learn something, right? And I bet it'll be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, but here, don't miss this though. The best leaders, they are curious, even though Adam said this word often gets overused and potentially even misused. The best leaders are curious people. And so be willing to say, hey, I'm not just going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on the other person. Questions are one of the best ways to do that. But maybe be willing to acknowledge that at times it could feel uncomfortable. There could be some discomfort in it.
Yeah.
But then I think learning how to practice genuine curiosity. Do I really want to know the answer to this? And if the answer is no, don't ask it. But those two questions you just gave, am I asking this to connect or control? And am I willing to hear something I don't expect? That is worth hanging on to for every single one of us. So thank you for that, Adam.
All right, buddy. Great to be with you. We'll talk next time, Clay. See you.
Well, that's all we got for today's episode of the How to Lead podcast. You can always reach out to us via email. We can be reached at info@howtolead.work. That's info@howtolead.work. Every episode is mixed and edited by the team over at Sound of a Rose. You can learn more about them at soundofarose.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.